back to the Nutrimedical Report, live for the 31st day of July, 2014, and joining us, Ted Anderson. And Ted was on the program regularly, the owner of Midas Resources here, and also the CEO of Genesis Communications, regularly with Bob Chapman. Since Bob's been unfortunate passing, we've had some issues where we really haven't had Ted on regularly, and I tell people regularly on the program that they should have a third of their assets in gold and silver because of the instability of the world economy, and almost certainly the issue of really the devaluation of not only the dollar but currencies everywhere. We can see that happening with the instability. I mean, the comments even by our former heads of secretaries of state have basically stated that the economy worldwide is in a turmoil. The Argentine situation is a good example. The bail-in policies in Europe over the last year or so. So, Ted, tell us how you see it in terms of Midas Resources and what people should be doing to protect themselves. Right now, I think we've listened to your program and your comments for many years. I've been here on Genesis Network 10 years, and I can tell you that they've been purchasing gold when it was quite a bit lower, sometimes a little higher, but always just purchasing, never selling. And I can tell you, I'm real glad I have bought gold and silver, and the reason being that if you don't, you're really asking for trouble down the road, because if the dollar crashes, and it's likely to crash at least 75% or more, it's the cost of food, groceries, just emergency, whatever, is going to go through the ceiling. And it already is, in the sense we have inflation rates are being miscalculated by formula that are being fiddled by federal officials. So, Ted, tell us the story about what's going on now since you've been on last.
Well, I tell you what, Bill, I can tell you the market is right now getting a little softer in gold. We are down by $13.40. Gold is at $12.81.10. Silver's a little softer too. What's going on is the marketplace is sort of being consumed by this, this Dow Jones Industrial Average is just, going up, and the S&P 500 and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of pressure being pushed toward the stocks and the bond market. But right now you're looking at Dow Jones Industrial Average down 254.11. The S&P is down 32.37. And so probably where most of the money is going at this point in time is, I'd have to say, it's going into treasuries and cash. Because right now I'm looking at the only thing that's up in the marketplace at this time, everything's in the red except for U.S. dollar. And you're right, what's going on in Argentina, what's happening over in the Ukraine, what's going on in Israel, and, there's so much turmoil that's happening right now. I mean, I just watched one of Ron Paul's statements saying that he's predicting that the stock market will crash. And he's probably right here. I think it's way overpriced. And, of course, right now at this particular time, Bill, with gold and silver sitting at $1,282.10, we're getting one of those, what I would consider last opportunities to get in when the market is soft. Now, we are heading towards the fall. Usually it's somewhere around the middle of August. It is even surprising for me to see August 15th that the market is starting to turn up again. And then all of a sudden, all these, what I would consider crises, triggers, people start to pay attention to them. In the United States, people they turn a blind eye to the markets, pretty much all of them, in the middle of the summer. And July is over, so I am expecting to see a lot more attention being put toward gold.
Yeah, and in other words, if you look at the markers, it's likely to be major fluctuation upward, maybe toward $1,800 to $2,000 an ounce. The reason why Israel's doing what they're doing now is moves of desperation. They know a wider war is coming. That's why they're doing things which are extremely bad, not only for the future of the nation being hit by multiple nations and their rocket attacks and military weapons, but we see the situation in Russia. In fact, you heard the latest report that this morning that the dead hand order was given by Putin literally today. And what the dead hand was last done in 1983, it basically means an automated system for launching on command all of the Russian nuclear weapons at every city of NATO and the West, including the United States. As an automated thing, if they detect from space in any way, shape, or form that America is deploying weapon systems or troops to Western Ukraine, to the Kiev area.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that's the first since 1983, during the height of the Cold War, right before Glasnost and Perestroika. But Russia's retooled all their military and their weapons. And, of course, the West continues to say that they violated the SALT Treaty. They've never had validation that Russia's ever followed the SALT Treaty. So I really think it's kind of ridiculous that we continue to play hardball with Russia when Russia can put a stop to any military moves we want anywhere. And now that we've ticked them off financially, the BRICS nations have $100 billion they put together against the U.S. dollar and against the Western currencies run by the Rothschilds and the Fed Reserve. So the dollar is going to go down one way or the other. There's no doubt, but it's a slow slide or a catastrophic fall. And I see the danger of war mounting, because NATO is going to deploy in the next few weeks. And Russia's basically, when they did put this dead man order out, basically saying, you move sideways, we're going to nuke your cities. This is not a game here. People don't realize this is not a game when you take on Syria. The toughest people on earth are Syrians and Russians. Right. And this idea that they can play this game and Israel won't get annihilated with hundreds of thousands of rockets or retaliate with nuclear weapons that won't be met with its thermonuclear exchange. And just the danger of it will squeeze the economy. The price of oil is going to go skyrocket, even though we've got sitting on tons of oil here in North America. Obama's done everything he can to cancel the XL pipeline, to make certain that they use dangerous chemical hydrofracking rather than safe, so they could expand the hydrofracking. And they haven't done anything to recharge the Agua Aquifer like the North American Water and Power Project. I mean, everything Obama and the maniacs in power, which are basically not really a federal government, we have a proxy globalist government, have done everything to destroy the dollar, American foreign business, American foreign, if you want to call it, appearance, by inadequate and incompetent behavior internationally, and it's ultimately killing the dollar. Right now, all we have is 90% of the new jobs are MIC jobs, I call them, that don't pay enough for a person to either pay off their student loans, have a house, apartment, or even have a family. So, a third of males under 36 are living at home with their parents still.
Well, there certainly has been a big shift in the economy, Bill, that's for darn sure. And they're reporting right now that jobless claims are going up. You just simply cannot always resort to the printing press without expecting a loss of purchasing power in the dollar.
Exactly. Well, it dilutes it all. I mean, it literally says, we're going to reach into your bank account, your home equity, maybe your security box where your value of your grandmother's jewelry is now going to be devalued, because as soon as they print that extra money, they devalue any assets that are actually still out there. Home equity, pension funds, anything, anywhere, even in foreign countries where the American dollar is denominated, like in Belize. It's literally an indirect tax. And people don't see that. They can't print money out of thin air and not have an effect on the value of the currency. There's a little stretch. There's a little stretch in it. But the stretch is going, because we're the only country on earth that could literally print our way out of any disaster and incompetence by our corrupt government. And that era is ending, isn't it?
It sure is. I mean, Bill, we've been relying on printing money here for, since Paul Volcker was in office. That's the last time I remember that the Federal Reserve actually tried to do something to stop the growth of money supply. It was 1974 when Richard Nixon allowed us to have gold here in the United States. 1971 when we were taken off the gold standard. You got to remember, the United States had very little or no inflation all the way up till 1971, and it really didn't hit until 1974. And since then, since the dollar's been flowing freely, and the Fed's been able to use the printing press, and by the way, the Fed really doesn't print the money, the Treasury does, and the Treasury gives it over to the Fed. But that's neither here nor there. Now the United States has all these obligations. Welfare recipients, and welfare is running rampant. You've got food stamps, you've got unemployed, the productivity of the country is still in the dismal shape, and now we have all these wars to worry about. What do you think they're going to do? They have to go to the printing press.
Exactly. They promised $3.7 billion to all the illegals that Obama created, which, by the way, we have a mixture. We have a humanitarian crisis with refugees, which is a small percentage, and a large percentage of illegals getting here that have no business being here, that are not going through the regular and should be better streamlined immigration process, but it's not been fixed. Welcome back, and Ted Anderson is here, head of Midas Resources. Ted, how do they contact you and your staff to try to get themselves? This is kind of like an ideal buying time, because this is the calm before the storm. If you're to look at a checklist of the things that are likely to happen, it's so darn long, you're going to run out of paper unless you use the fool's cap with a double line and split it down the middle. The likelihood that we're going to see a war expanding in the Middle East, a war expanding with a dead man order from Russia now today, and the Russian troops meeting and a Duma meeting secretly this summer with no reports coming out from RT or any Russian news service. If they say something is going to happen or talk about something, nothing's going to happen. But it's just like the Israelis. If nobody talks, it means bad stuff's going to happen soon.
Right. Yeah, and you're asking how they get a hold of Midas Resources, and the best way to get in contact with us is to dial 1-800-686-2237. Again, that's 800-686-2237. And Bill, like you were saying, I mean, the thing is that there's so much unrest that's going on across the United States and across the world. Putin, Russians, I mean, the whole thing. It's like there's this big theater of countries that are willing to fight each other, and the United States is doing its usual job of stepping in and putting its nose in the business, and for some reason we're writing people checks. We don't have the money. And
well, not only that, the last 10 days, most people aren't aware of this, but without even the Israelis requesting additional ammunition, because they literally depleted their own ammunition stocks 10 days ago. They're already into our restocking, which we keep depots there in Israel now. And so they're already 10 days in, and they didn't even request it. We just restocked them. And, of course, it's our expense, the same way when we loan them the money to buy aircraft, like the jacked-up F-15 fighters that are supercharged up, and their missile systems, including the doubling of the Patriot 2 missile system in the Iron Dome, which just was done last week. We pay for that. It's like, don't people pull their hair out in chunks and say, we can't have people in Michigan paying their water and electrical bill, yet we buy more ammunition so the Israelis can go nuts and maybe attack Iran, which will precipitate a thermonuclear war? I just don't get it. I can't understand this.
Well, there's certainly a lot of push from the Israelis and probably mostly the Jewish community here, but not just the Jewish community, for us to defend Israel,
Well, we can defend Israel better, I think. What we should have done, because I've been back and forth to Israel a number of times, is they should have cleaned out those tunnels and prevented rockets from coming in years ago. The second thing I think they should have done is annex the state of Israel, because a lot of them are dual citizens anyway. And then the Joint Chiefs of Staff could go to sleep at night because they know that the strategic rocket forces of Israel would be under control of our U.S. military. They wouldn't be off with a trigger finger ready to shoot anybody, but we'd also start sending in Delta forces and special ops to clean up the rat's nest of all the missile systems in surrounding nations.
Right.
That could have been done very surgically without killing citizens and babies blowing up. And we would have surgically gone in with everything, including our level 10 space-based weapons. Phone call to head of country XYZ. You see the building across the street? Evacuated, because we're going to vaporize it from space. Once they realized exactly that we are not going to be restrained, we're not going to try to kill citizens, and we're just going to defang them, it's over. It's like defanging an animal that's dangerous in a zoo.
Right.
And if we had done that rather than the current mess, which is Israel's operation right now is an operation of desperation. It's not an operation out of strength, it's out of weakness.
Right.
And that's really dangerous to Muslims, because when Muslims smell blood like a shark, they're ready to pounce on you. And, these surrounding countries are not stupid people. They're very aggressive. They'll get the shirt off your back, but if you try to harm them or their family, they'll kill you and all your relatives 4 generations out.
Yeah, that's the way they like to operate. And, I just don't know if there ever will be peace in that part of the world. You just
have to respell it PIECE.
Yeah,
Pieces of nations, pieces of babies, pieces of Israeli citizens that decide to get in tanks going down back streets where Hamas has got Russian-made tank-killing rocket weapons. I mean, what do they think is going to happen? Do they think this is all going to be a one-way party where they just crush Hamas and the Palestinians? No, it's not. They're going to have missiles raining down on them, so every square inch of Israel will be turned into a dust heap of fuel, air bombs, biological weapons, and chemical. A lot of them, if you explode them in air over their cities and towns and villages, they're actually more lethal. So the idea that you have Iron Dome, think you just can knock it out. I had friends who were in Israel during the first Gulf War, and they were in these shelters, which you can only stay in so many minutes. You don't have enough oxygen, you start to suffocate. And the debris from these rockets, and these are just stupid Scud rockets with no payload on them, the debris caused more harm than the actual rocket. The rocket would just kind of fall in the desert and kind of burn itself out, maybe cause a little grass fire. And that's it. But you blow it up and you got debris everywhere, especially now if you had a payload of biological or chemical or fuel air bomb, you've made it a far more lethal.
Sure.
And so I don't understand the logic that these guys, they think that being a tough and pounding the heck out of the people there is going to win. It's like, no, this is a strategy of defeat. Same way as our American government, just printing your way out and saying, well, we're going to loan money not just to American corporations or transnational, which they've done. Then General Electric moved their business to China. General Motors, they're building giant facilities in China. It's like, well, you can see why they'd want to expand their market.
Right.
But to strip a plant in America making, say, computers for General Electric in Wisconsin and move it to, Madison, Wisconsin, and move it to Shanghai, China, or Beijing, or some other big cities, like, that's anti-Americans. Like, that shouldn't be allowed.
Well, what's amazing to me, Bill, is how resilient the U.S. economy is, because you just take a look at what the politicians and the bankers and just what's going on to the United States economy and how much money is being filtered and funneled away from us.
Exactly. The reason is resilient because we have 90% of the world's patents. We have the most resilient, hard-fighting people. That's why if they ever try to do martial law, and I've said this before, martial law, and I work with the federal government, FBI, and CDC on Operation Top Off and Dark Winter, is an illusion. They can put black ski mask guys on the roads to block the freeways, shut down the internet, and close off your bank account, etc. But if they try to impose martial law, the government will be over in days. There's no way martial law will ever work in this country with 94 million armed Americans. It's not going to happen, ever. In fact, the shadow of it was a good example up in Nevada when the Bureau of Land Management decided to attack citizens there, and they realized, like, oops, there'll be a big dang-ups. In fact, if this continues in the border with Mexico, you'll see enough civilian militia there that we will not even need the federal government involved. In fact, if they get involved, there'll be a pitched battle between our civilian militia and the federal government trying to stop us from preventing the massive immigration of people that shouldn't be here properly through the regular channels. I personally think they should have sounded down air-conditioned buses to these mothers with their babies, but, to send children along without their mother and drop them at the border because of the so-called humanitarian crisis, that doesn't even allow our laws to even bring them in as refugees. And then the United Nations tries to beat us up. I just think that Obama and his crew need to be impeached immediately. And if we don't take back business, and I mean, tariffs on international transport so that China can't dump pollution in the air, print enough dollars to equal the growth of the actual physical economy. It doesn't mean you can't print dollars, but it has to equal the actual growth of the physical and intellectual economy of America. Of
course, you and I both know that you're talking about impeaching the president, and the House is considering it, but I don't think that Boehner's going to do it. So
no, Boehner's not involved. Actually, we've had the U.S. Justice Foundation on just last week, and they have the articles of impeachment before the proper committee. So it's probably going to happen after. Welcome back, and so Ted, I want to get people emotionally to kind of connect to this. They listen to all different programs. Today we're going to have Tim Alexander on with this blog on Europe Business. We have the information about Chris Harris and Fukushima. Just look at the number of nations like dominoes that are ready to fall. Japan is massively printing money under the Abe government. They have an energy crisis where they're now teetering on restarting nuclear reactors, and even their own courts have shut them down because the number of earthquakes, 5+ has increased 500% since 3/11, 3.5 years ago with Fukushima Daiichi. We have the Middle East really ready to blow up, which means oil there will be rockets through the ceiling. And by the way, the conflict with Russia's already stated they're probably going to drive the price of oil and gas to the Europeans through the ceiling. So the economy of Germany is going to crash this fall with the conflict increasing between NATO and Russia. I mean, if you look at all these different what ifs, it's virtually guaranteed. It's like walking into Las Vegas and knowing you already have the codes to walk out with a sack full of money. And if people don't start preparing financially, physically, spiritually for what's coming, they're going to be in a state of shock if they haven't had, I call it like your financial greenhouse, gold and silver coins stuffed away, not in a safety deposit box that they can grab at the bank, but at your home where you can defend it. And your physical greenhouse where you have, heritage seeds and the ability to grow food because you can't be able to afford to go to the grocery store anymore.
Well, I mean, that's just it, Bill. I mean, I don't know how anybody looking at today's economy and looking at the way that the things are going on in the world, and like you said, Japan, Russia, China, the United States, all the debt, everything that's happening, all the
China too. I mean, look at China. It's not doing well. Everybody thinks they're a big powerhouse. No, they're only created by transnational corporations.
Well,
their debt's now 250% of their GDP, and they have to build warehouses to store the stuff they can't even sell to us.
Right.
Because if they don't have them working, all these millions of a 250 million of itinerant workers that are literally hanging hammocks in these factories, their economy will blow up. They don't even have a middle class to afford to go to these giant cities they built. It's a crazy economy in China, and they're polluting so much that 20% of the territory and rivers in China are toxic. You can't drink or live or even breathe the air there. In places like Beijing, you got to walk around with an air mask on all the time, and you can have a 1/4 inch of rubber dust on your car if you leave it up for a few hours anywhere in the city. I mean, that's why they had to shut all these factories down before the Beijing Games a few years ago.
Right. But it comes down to this, Bill. I mean, just about every car you see driving around in the United States has car insurance on it, just in case we get into a wreck. Man, right. I tell you, the economy there's no way to avoid the wreck. If you're not buying financial insurance for your own well-being, you're just playing Russian roulette.
Yeah, so maybe we'll call this the July 31st last chance sale, because if things twitch, and because we're very close to the Hebrew, I call the Hebrew bad day called the 9th of Av, where all the bad moves of Israel, that alone, we're not even talking about Ukraine. I mean, with the Russians marching on the border, with the Dumas, the Russian government, the Duma being called, with the dead man order by Vladimir Putin the first since 1983 at the height of the Cold War. This is like, if you just look at it, if you're like a historian from centuries ahead and humankind survived what's coming, you'd have to look back and say this was far more ominous than the changes before World War I and II.
Man, it sure is, and that's the whole point. I mean, you're right now you can pick up, like for instance, we have these walking Liberty halves, and they're at $13.43. I mean, just a couple of years ago when silver was topping off at $50 an ounce, the same coin was sitting at $30. And how could you ever expect that the economy is going to do well when the United States behaves the way they do? You
can't. You can't expect it. In fact, they put $100 billion down right off the bat, right after the World Cup games. And when Putin was flying back, there were stories flying around. We put up some of them too because we thought maybe there was an attempt to assassinate him, and it still might be a possibility. I think it's more likely the evidence is tilting toward the fact that the Western Ukrainians probably tried to assassinate him because they knew that the flight path of the Russian jet and the markings were virtually identical to that Malaysian MH17 flight. But that kind of stuff is really bad. I mean, when you start trying to do an assassination of a world leader, coming back from a new idea to set up a new World Bank and IMF alternative, because what do you think got Saddam Hussein killed and Muammar Gaddafi? Setting up an oil bourse and an alternative gold exchange. That's what got them killed. It wasn't invading people or killing people. That's fine with the CIA-operated U.S. government. It's how dare you violate the dollar and the gold standard control of the petrodollar. Yeah. That'll get you killed. Yeah,
getting in the way of the process of making money.
Yeah.
I mean, that is when the Warburgs and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds got together to form the Central Bank of the United States in 1910. They wanted to be able to print the money and control the purse of the United States of America.
Right.
And if you want to get in the way of that, that's a death sentence. But, the people are getting robbed blind, and it just makes absolutely no sense that they don't do something about it. I mean, right now at this time, you have a precious metals market that's fairly soft. We just came down from $1,900 an ounce gold, and now we're sitting at $1,280. We've already seen it jump right up to $1,400 again. I know that it's not.
The sales should be, your phone should be jumping off the hook that people realize, especially if they're long-term listeners. They should say, "Whoa, I better put off that vacation or not buy that extra boat or whatever. I better downsize my this and that and better buy some reserve gold and silver coins because they're not going to have a time like this again." I think that whatever is going to happen in the next few years, the price of these commodities is going to close to the ceiling because the Chinese and the Indians and smart people elsewhere, where the number of people that are in the middle class in India, for example, is larger than the entire population of America. People don't know that, and they can all buy gold. The same way as the people in the rising middle class in China, because they have such a large population. If they decide to buy even a few ounces of gold, the gold market's depleted.
Right, there's nothing.
And no matter
left.
how much paper money they play around with these paper gold exchange guys, they have to actually deliver physical gold.
Yep.
Because these people want it in their home. That's why when the Japanese attacked China and the raping of Nanking, all the homes, the people had their own home safe. They didn't trust banks. They had their gold in their home.
Right, and when you walk into, if you go through, any of these big towns in India, or I remember being in Thailand, and it was just no matter where you went, there's these shops with lots of gold, 24 karat, 22 karat gold chains, and these people are buying gold chains and they're bringing them home and putting them on their person because they know that they can trust the gold much more than they can trust their own currencies that the government is trying to get them to take.
Well, the rupee is being devalued literally every month. They know that. The Chinese currency, although they keep purposely keeping the value low, if their economy crashes, the Chinese, what happens is half of their entire business market now is shark loans. Mm-hmm. Those shark loans, the rate of interest being charged is insane. So they got like 12-14% inflation per month now. So people are literally, they're freaking out in China. And people don't know this. We don't get very much financial news at all about how bad it is everywhere else, because America is buffered because of this giant capacity for America to build and grow money to the tune of quadrillions of dollars over the past 70 plus years, 80 years. But that game's over soon. And when it's over, it's going to get really ugly.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I put 1 gram bars on my website, so people can afford it. Even if you're if you're a small-time player, we're still selling 1/8 gram gold bars for $16.95. So that means the average person who has to put gas in their tank can afford to buy 1/8 of a gram of gold. I can't say it enough. People need to be on a regular regiment of buying gold and silver and salting it away. It's going to be one of the things that'll be money later on when they need it.
It's always been money, and it'll continue to be money in the future, too. 800-686-2237 is Midas Resources. Thank you, Ted. Amazing program today.
Yep, thanks, Dr. Diggle.
You're welcome. Welcome back, and I have an interesting article I pulled up here from GreenMed Info, and it's one of the things I think people should seriously consider getting a membership at GreenMed Info. It's really good articles on natural wellness. And the article is The Bitter Truth About Splenda. And again, we've got page 1 and page 2 of the article posted up, written by Sayer G., one of their great authors there. And of course, we posted some other articles. There's affiliate articles also present. Aspartame, safety approved in 90 nations, but damages brain. Splenda, sucralose, found to have diabetes-promoting effects. Saccharin and sugar found more addictive than cocaine. Artificial sweeteners found more weight-promoting than sugar. Sucralose, Splenda harms vastly underestimated. Baking releases dioxin. Dioxin is one of the most deadly molecules known to man that destroys the ability to methylate folic acid to turn to 5-methylfolate. So dioxins and dibenzofurans are pesticides. So eating Splenda releases dioxin. Isn't that wonderful? And your so-called dear doctors that are knuckleheads, and your Food and Drug Administration, we call fatal drugs allowed, only allow fatal drugs, only allow a certain amount of death and destruction, and we call morbidity, because they have big, deep pockets, and there's a rotating door between the regulatory authorities and these various companies, the drug companies. And it's not just an American problem, it's a global problem. If you go to Europe and you find these drug companies, they are transnational boards. They're tied directly in with, say, the European Commission. They're tied in with things like the Codex Alimentarius, or food rules developed literally by a Nazi in prison in the 1960s called the food rules. The idea to get drug companies get total control over the idea of what health is, which is, hey, it's another toxic pill with a side group added to a natural molecule to make it deadly and dangerous, and the liver and the body cannot detoxify it. So that gives you an idea how crazy things are, but that's the truth. Other articles we posted here last week was wheat, 200 clinically confirmed reasons not to eat wheat. And of course we had celeb Bono of course, has the United Nations Special Envoy, partners with Monsanto, G8, and to BioRec Africa. So Mr. Bono is a pretty dark character in terms of his soul. 5 steps to heal your leaky gut, and of course, especially if you're using things like ibuprofen, you want to use ageless immunoglobulins. You want to use things like our carnosine. You want to use things that are Living Probiotic and Living Probiotic Ultra. We have the Result 6 strain and Living Probiotic Ultra, the most powerful probiotic on the planet. You want to stop free radical damage, and you want to heal the connective tissues in the gut wall, and that can be things such as Collagen Max, anti-inflammatories, Nutritrala, Regenerex, and Cell Detox Glutathione. And so that gives you an idea of the kind of range of things that we do here. Pretty remarkable, actually, if you look at primarily major articles that are present. Let's look at some of the health news, too. Of course, the latest is the experimental Ebola serum was used on a U.S. patient. A dose of experimental serum arrived in Liberia to be tried on a U.S. charity worker struggling for her life. It was only enough for one of the 2 infected workers. So, whoa, I guess that's scary. And a number of cases where only one airplane flight away from arriving in America with Ebola. And the World Health Organization's they're quietly preparing Ebola isolation centers in America, but they're not really telling the public just how quickly it could arrive in a flight. And of course, if the person is shedding virus, if they cough or sneeze, that virus does not have any barrier. There's no HEPA filters in the aircraft. There's no chain of custody to send off the HEPA filter from every flight to decon or decontaminate an aircraft from resistant TB, Ebola, or any other airborne virus like an H7N9 superflu, which replicates faster than any other known flu virus in history. So you start to see the level of incompetence I consider borders on madness and evil. And people should start to kind of grasp, you don't take personal protection taking antipathogenics, you're just asking for trouble. We're now seeing the spread of chikungunya all over the United States, all the way up to New York State now. We have West Nile virus now popping up in Colorado. A lot of people call it chronic fatigue. The disease of chronic fatigue or acute fatigue. It's West Nile virus, and it's being carried by a special type of mosquito that we call an Olympic level mosquito that can fly at those altitudes, which are around Colorado, a mile high plus. So, this is a season for plagues. Airborne pneumonic plague, literally. The airborne plague is in Colorado. We also have the hantavirus all the way through the southwest United States, resistant tuberculosis, multi-drug TB coming up here. And again, by the way, it's easy to knock these pathogens out with our antipathogenics. These children that are being brought across here, if they were humanitarian refugees, they need a proper isolation center for a couple months. They need to be treated humanely so they don't decon physically, but also to make sure they're not carrying things on buses and planes and trains. It's just insanity how incompetent our government is. And then on the other hand, immigration should be streamlined, efficient, lower cost, and not revolve all kinds of lawyers and other people, so that people who do need to get here in a timely fashion. I mean, my son just got his citizenship 3 weeks ago, and he's been living here since a little boy. He was born in Canada, but I'm an American, so is my mother. I'm thinking, this should not take years. This is ridiculous. And I can tell you that I'm totally fed up with them saying they need more money. No, they don't need to increase the complexity of their paperwork. You'd think it was going to get a citizenship in Switzerland or Australia or Austria, which I talked to Harley Schlanger about his wife and how their documents, how if you try to even get citizenship in Austria, it has to all be translated. Criminality and bureaucracy is everywhere. But it's particularly bad here in America, especially when you have the largest economy on earth, and even with all the craziness of transnational corporations stripping us of our means of production and trying to destroy the middle class, we rebound tremendously. If we just get rid of Obama and have a proper market economy, America will rebound very quickly, because we're going to be the number one oil producer, energy producer, probably within months, on the planet by a big margin. We're the number one idea producer. We have lots of clean water if we just bring water down from the northwest United States and the Great Lakes. There is no excuse whatsoever for this nation not to be so much more powerful than anywhere else and prosperous and able to support a larger population if we just redistribute the water and power and have more efficient systems to have buried cable using plasma energy distribution cables, which are high energy cable that doesn't require booster stations or towers that can be knocked down with extreme weather, or tornadoes. We need to use our imagination too, such as I mentioned before, plasma physics of knocking out tornadoes. A plasma energy gun could literally just uncoil the force of hot and cold air masses in the plasma, because that's what it is, plasma physics, to turn tornadoes into small dirt devils, in order to destroy them, to shatter them, to control our weather for good, not evil, so we don't have the drought in Texas and the Southwest getting so severe. And of course, the globalists aren't going to tell you that they're blocking the radiation from Fukushima Daiichi rather than fixing the problem. As I say, my book is very near completion. It'll be done in the next few days. It'll be available for our listeners to purchase from us on disc, the entire book with all of the emails back and forth, all the material. They'll have a lot of information to review, but real concrete technical solutions for the engineering of the plant, for remediation and reduction of radiation releases, specific technical solutions for how to protect the oceans and the people, and a little imagineering too in terms of how we deal with isotopes that have already escaped, that are in the environment now, in the troposphere, the oceans, and not just the Pacific Ocean, but spreading through the transoceanic escalator currents along the coastal areas that over 26 months carries that radioactive water to every ocean on Earth. So every ocean on Earth is now being gradually toxified by radiation from Fukushima. You might not think it's a big problem, but when you have isotopes that have half-lives of 36 plus years, it takes about 140 to 160 years for you to get that down to an acceptable level if it's stopped. But it's not stopping. And some of the isotopes, like plutonium, their half-life is 24,900 years. That's not going away soon. We're talking about if it stopped, to get down to, quote, acceptable or reasonable levels, you'd need 4 half-lives, depending on the level you started off with first, because one plutonium particle is a death sentence. So when people are getting cancer rates go through the ceiling, when they're seeing dementia, birth defects, lack of fertility, dementia, all kinds of problems, cardiac arrhythmias, if you're deficient, for example, in calcium, magnesium, especially magnesium, you're going to suck up cesium-137 like crazy. So it's not optional not to take our magnesium taurate, magnesium glycinate, malate, magnesium potassium citrate. If you don't amp your magnesium through the ceiling, you're going to suck it up in every gland in your body, and you're going to get sick. As I say, it's going to leave a mark first, and then it's going to cause a lot of pain and suffering before you die. And it's totally preventable. Maximum nutrition will make you put a firewall between you and toxins. Just like drinking, imagine drinking Splenda and cooking with it. Cooking Splenda turns it into dioxin. Wow. Back in a moment with hour number 2, Ryan will be talking about NutriMeds, and in hour 3, our updates from Tim Alexander, our news blog, and Chris Harris, a nuclear expert. And I'm on hour 2 of the Rense Network as a guest.